Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Hudak. All right, there were two giant stories surrounding the New Orleans Saints today. Cam Jordan's contract extension, Alvin Kamara's 3-game suspension. Of course, the Saints were back on the practice field today. Maddy Hudak, good enough to join us as she has all throughout training camp. Maddy, we appreciate it. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It was certainly a scorcher out there for fan day, as they are trying to move things inside most days, but have to please the fans.
Yeah. Let me start. I'll get to practice in a second. Let me just start, if I could, with a thought on the two stories we just touched on. Number one, Cam Jordan's 2-year contract extension. Thoughts on the decision today?
I think it really just makes sense for both parties. I mean, just in terms of his production at his age and what he's already been able to bring to the Saints, playing, in every game except for the COVID one being the first game that he missed in his career, and especially with kind of the issues with injury on the other side of the defensive line with all of the people they've drafted to replace him, it makes sense, and it's just a good story for him to retire as a Saint. And if they're able to kind of move numbers around in doing so, which I'm sure they are, then it's a good feel-good story on a Friday camp.
Yeah. It's the most guaranteed money, as I understand, for a player at that position of his age in NFL history. So what a testament to him and his longevity. Now, more on-field relevance, of course, is Alvin Kamara, 3-game suspension, which we now know. Were you thinking, or was there any scuttle that where the number would settle relative to what we found out it is?
I think it was a good number in terms of what it could have been. I had kind of compared it to a situation, I believe it was a Vikings offensive lineman in 2008, where he had a similar brawl outside of a nightclub and was suspended for 4 games. And so that's kind of what my barometer was. But it seems like the meeting to go see Roger Goodell, it did some good there, because they're now skipping that formal process, which would, give Kamara a right to appeal the sentence, but it would probably end up looking perhaps a bit lengthier than 3 games. So seems like that's kind of what the Saints were expecting. They're preparing for some sort of suspension, and I think 3 is pretty easy to absorb than, say, 6.
Maddy Hudak is with us. So 3 easier to absorb than 6. Let's go there. Based on what you've seen at the running back position so far in camp, we've talked a lot about Kendre Miller. Have you noticed anything from Jamal Williams so far?
It actually got a little more attention today. I noticed that a lot of that 7-on-7 and team drills were either, I put in my notes, as little tosses or handoffs out of the backfield, including, Kamara had a really good wheel route and a couple other ones, but they're definitely involving all of the running backs much more in the passing game, which gives me kind of confidence because, A, that kind of it inspires the idea that that's what the perpetuated role again for Alvin Kamara is going to look like this season. You can just tell that he just seems a little more energized despite all this stuff going on, because he's kind of back to being that kind of creative playmaker out of the backfield, and the fact that they're involving the other running backs in a similar play style really just kind of gives me a little more confidence that that's what we can expect. See a little more creativity with all of those backs, who I think all have the ability to catch those short wheel routes out of the backfield. You
mentioned that you put that in your notebook. Let's kind of empty some of those notes. Who offensively stood out today?
Offense did not have the best day. I would say Jake Haener, to be honest. He just continues to really impress me in the throws that he makes and the confidence that he has, the timing that he has with his throws. The first-team offense is a little disjointed, but it's worth noting that Michael Thomas had a rest day today, and you can just kind of see how much having that number one connection really, I think, opens up the rest of the offense. And the defense got a little more creative today. That's kind of what I would point out more than anything else, because you're not getting those in-game situational benefits like setting up a run game or using Taysom Hill in a creative manner. We don't really see them use them much in training camp. But the defense, had a 3-man rush at one point where they had 6 defensive backs out there, and we're seeing them start to blitz a little with Hugo Amadi, who has kind of piqued my curiosity at this point. He had a sack today, and, it's worth noting, too, that the Throckmorton was out today with an elbow injury, I believe, and we're still missing Pete, so they had Landon Young and James Hurst in there, and so not the starting offensive line. But it's just kind of hard to tell who's really winning the trenches battle at camp.
She's on Twitter at Maddy Hudak _94. You mentioned Hugo Amadi there. Give us a sort of a thumbnail back on that defensive backfield and how that's kind of shaken out so far.
Well, today was kind of the first day we'd seen them use anything more than, I think they might have ran nickel a few times over training camp, but we've been seeing a lot of that 3 linebacker set. And early on today, we did see them try out Zach Bond in coverage on Alvin Kamara, and that was one of Alvin Kamara's better plays. Even though I thought Zach Bond did a good enough job, I still think that's too tall of a task to have, coverage linebackers out there. But I brought up that they've missed that blitz ability in losing personnel like Caden Ellis, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Tre'Quan Alexander, and I've noticed that they have put Hugo Amadi up on the line of scrimmage quite a few times now, and that he's actually has some pass rush moves and is able to get to the quarterback or at least make them have to get out of the pocket. And so if you're getting that out of one of your defensive backs, we saw them, bring 6 out there at one point, and that's where he did have that sack when he was blitzing on that play. So it intrigues me to look a little more into perhaps his film from the Seahawks. So just looking at the last year of his career, it looks like he was traded 3 times, never got the chance to settle, but he's already had a significant amount of production in camp.
Maddy, you mentioned the offensive lineman out. So no Pete today. You said no Throckmorton today. Did anybody stand out for, I know you said it was a bad day for the offense. Did anybody offensively on the line have a good day?
It's kind of hard for me to say.
Yeah.
I think Eric McCoy has just been kind of the strongest part of that line, and it's just unfortunate that, him being the center, he's always kind of being affected by these guards being out either on rest day and now losing Pete, and they've tried out quite a few guys at left guard. I think we would kind of see less of a rotating musical chairs type thing in a real game setting, so it's just really hard to tell what's kind of going on there, but Jameis Winston was probably the one who looked the least flustered, except Haener seems to be able to use his legs to navigate the pocket a little bit more, but Derek Carr just seemed to be a little flustered by what they were doing with the pass rush today. But again, a lot more creativity on defense, I think, than we've seen in them primarily using that 4-3 base.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Matt. Like we know Derek Carr is the starter, obviously, but there's been so much attention paid Jake Haener with good reason. He's playing well, and he's a rookie. It's always going to be someone people ask about. But Jameis has sort of been lost in the shuffle there. Has there been anything of note from Jameis so far into week 2?
I think he's looked better in this training camp than he did in the last 2, to be honest. Not enough to turn this into any sort of quarterback competition because, again, I just think we're seeing, the growing pains of, I think it starts out strong. The defense gets stronger as camp goes on, and they're still kind of finding their rhythm a little bit on offense and trying out a lot of things, whereas the defense is kind of the same people that have played together at this point for several seasons in a row, whereas you have a lot of new players on the offensive side. And I would add Michael Thomas to that, given how much time he's missed in the last couple of seasons. And then you just see how much of a difference I think he makes in training camp being gone. But, yeah, Jameis, they've all thrown some questionable throws here and there, but he seems to really have settled into the backup role and seems a little more relaxed in the pocket, and maybe that's a byproduct of not having this kind of quarterback competition where he's been looking over his shoulder the last couple seasons, but it makes you feel a lot more confident about their quarterback room as a whole.
She is Maddy Hudak, Saints camp correspondent, with us here all throughout Saints training camp. On Twitter at Maddy Hudak _94. Y'all give her a follow. Thanks, Maddy. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.